Hello, see ya, konnichiwa, bonjour. Shannon Kennedy here, resident polyglot at Drops, back with another episode of Ask the Polyglot. So let's get into your questions. How can I remember Japanese and Korean letters? How hard is it to write in Japanese? I used scripts to learn to read and write in both Japanese and Korean, and I found it helped me remember the characters far more than any other technique I used for other writing systems in the past. I also get practice by writing by hand, and I read when I can so that the writing systems get more familiar. As far as how hard it is to write in Japanese, the answer is it depends. If you're aiming to be able to write in kana and kanji, it takes time. There are lots of kanji to learn. And if you're focusing on just kana, that's hiragana and katakana, it's relatively simple as they're both alphabets and they can be learned fairly quickly. Why are some languages easier for some people to learn than others? How easy or hard it is to learn a language depends on a lot of different factors. Your motivation, how similar it is to your native language, how many hours you put into studying, how you study, and how often you use the language or get exposure to it. There is this myth that there is a language gene, that some people are naturally gifted with the ability to learn a language. This isn't true. There is not a language gene. I'm going to say it again. There is not a language gene. Most of the world actually speaks more than one language. It's often only in monolingual countries that there's this perception, and someone who has the ability to speak more than one language often seems exceptional. So think of it this way. Spending lots of time reading manuals about how to drive won't make you a good driver. Spending time behind the wheel will. The same is true of languages. At what point do you start reading books and the news, and where do you look for easy learning content? I try to start reading as soon as possible. If it's in a language that uses the same writing system as my native language, I may even start reading right away. If it's in a language with a different writing system, I'll spend time learning the writing system first. Once I get comfortable in, though I may not yet have mastered it, I will start reading. You can start reading with individual words. You don't need to have a full text, and you can even do this with drops. Then, once you are comfortable reading single words, you can move on to simple beginner texts. Once I reach that stage, I'll then move on to more advanced or even native level content. To do this, I personally use Lingq, Lingq. It's an app that supports language learners' reading endeavors. They have lots of content for learners, and I can also import my own content, the latter of which I most often do. What's your favorite language? It depends on the day. Though if you asked any of my teammates at Drops, they'll probably tell you my favorite language is Croatian. And happily, we recently added this language to the app. How long did it take you to speak Mandarin? When I started learning Mandarin, I aimed to pass the HSK4 exam after a year of study, and I did. The HSK4 is the minimum level that's required for universities and jobs. So that's why I aimed for that particular level. So you could technically say it took me about a year, but I was conversational in the language several months before I sat the exam. What's the least painful way to memorize verbs? Through context. Doing grammar drills isn't enjoyable for many. To learn verbs and conjugations, I instead do it through context. This means that rather than memorizing a verb table, I am, you are, he is, she is, etc., I write out relevant sentences to me and work on them that way. I am a musician. You are my teacher. He is my son. She is my friend. It gives you phrases that you can use while still learning verbs. Are there any good language resources out there? Yes, lots. And of course, I'm a bit biased, but my favorite is Drops. How can I learn the different gender expressions in Russian? Russian has 3 genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. There are general rules for these. Feminine nouns have certain endings, masculine nouns others, and neuter their own. There are, as with any rule, of course, exceptions, but the rules exist because they offer you an easy way to quickly identify something. So I recommend using this as a starting point. From there, it's a matter of matching adjectives and other grammar to the noun. Let's start with the noun. There are some vowels in the new language that are really unpronounceable for me. What do I do? If you're struggling with pronunciation, the best thing that you can do is lots and lots and lots of listening. Familiarize yourself with the sounds in the language. The more you listen, the more you'll be able to distinguish these difficult sounds. I also recommend watching videos of native speakers. Watch their mouths and the shapes they form. This will give you a clue as to how you yourself can create these sounds by creating those same shapes with your mouth. Then, record yourself saying these sounds. Listen back. Compare it to a recording of a native speaker, and then maybe share the recording with a native speaker and ask for feedback on your pronunciation. Rinse and repeat. With practice, you'll be able to produce these difficult sounds. I can't speak well without a cheat sheet. Any advice? My advice is not to worry about needing the cheat sheet. It's okay. What you can do is aim to reference it less and less as you speak. Sometimes just knowing that the sheet is there is all you need, and you don't even need to look at it at all. It's just a safety net of sorts. But my advice is don't worry about it. You'll naturally start to move away from it as you progress in the language. How do I improve my listening skills? The best way to improve your listening skills is by doing a ton of listening. Listen to the audio slower. Listen to it at natural speed. Find a transcript and read while listening. Read the transcript and then listen to the audio without it. Listen to the audio and then double check your comprehension by looking at the transcript. Don't be afraid to listen to the same audio several times and in several different ways. How do you arrange your schedule to study more than one language at a time? I don't study more than one language at a time, or I should say I don't learn more than one language at a time. Instead, I study only one new language, then I have periods where I maintain several languages. To do this, I only study for short periods at a time. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 20 minutes here. This lets me get exposure to and helps me maintain several languages in a single day. When I'm doing a new language project, like with Farsi, where I'm learning a new language, I just surrender the other languages briefly and focus on that new language so that I can get it up to a high level quickly. And I know that this is only going to be for a short period, like 3 months, so I don't worry too much about the other languages. They'll still be there when I'm ready to pick them back up. And while I may need to do some review and some refreshing, languages tend to be like riding a bicycle. You don't really ever forget them. They're there in the back of your mind. You just need to get a little bit comfortable once again. How do you keep languages you aren't focusing on fresh in your mind? If it's a language I want to maintain, I will do some light vocabulary study or light reading each day, maybe about 5 minutes, just to keep contact with the language. Otherwise, I don't actually worry about keeping it fresh. Instead, I'll let it go, knowing I'll be able to pick it back up when I'm ready. And this is exactly what I did with my Italian Refresh project, and we'll include a link to that. How much time do you study languages every day? It depends, but I usually study at least an hour a day. If I'm doing intensive language projects, I may study for as many as 4 to 8 hours a day, but that's not often. That's really in extreme circumstances. So my average is probably closer to an hour a day. And that's it for this episode of Ask the Polyglot. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing your questions in the next round. See ya!